This indeed was our first professional film. It's the first one we've done in sort of with any sort of budget. The other ones we've done pretty much have been done around this house.
Our house with just simple home camera.
Yep. And so basically these have just been put together, shown to friends, never taken really seriously. I went to the army after that, and when I came back, Hayden and I sort of agreed to become filmmakers and to do it together. So Black Button was
our first step towards becoming professional filmmakers.
That's right. How did we come up with the concept? Well, we came up with the concept when we were travelling back from a summer film school course that we'd done. It's the only training we've ever had, was just this month-long sort of, you pay-as-you-go film school. And we were on the train on the way back. We were planning to actually write and shoot another short film called The Window, which we still plan to do, but it got put on hold when we came up with this idea. And basically the idea was Hayden and I were on the train and we were asking each other hypothetical questions. So, for example, how much would it cost for you to tip that person's coffee on their head? Or, things like that. Never intended to do them, of course, but hypothetically, what would it take? And then Hayden
asked the question, would you kill someone for $1 million?
And that's where it came from.
So it formed the kernel of the idea that became Black Button.
We started saying, would it be a lever that you pulled or a button? Would you
have to kill them yourself, like a knife or a gun?
How did it work? And then we sort of said, just pushing a button, simple as that. Divorcing the human being from the act of violence. And once we came up with that idea, we just said that could make a good short film. In terms of writing it, pretty much went through it very, very carefully. We'd spent day after day just going over the script.
We just keep making draft after draft and just refining, tweaking words, phrases.
And minor things a lot of the time. We wanted the 9th draft before we actually shot it. And that was 2 months of writing, actually, just to get the words, the phrases exactly as we wanted them. Hayden's addition predominantly to the process was to add the phrase Mr. Roberts at the end of all the things that Robert Grubb said in the film. He felt it added a certain ambience.
It added to his character.
It did. So, but no, we all worked very hard on that script writing process. And storyboarding was probably the most time-consuming element of making
long and arduous.
Yep. We basically...
But also fun.
It was fun. Yeah. We basically just sort of planned every shot because we figured this is not something you could wing when you've got such a limited environment to be able to shoot in.
We shot it in 2 days, and that was because of the planning, because we basically did every single shot in the
2 half days, more than anything else. And the framing and everything that happened in the film was very deliberate. We knew just where we wanted the camera to be at all times, and that on the day then allowed us to focus on acting and lighting and other issues like that.
I suppose our challenge was in a small environment, i.e. one room, how to keep it dynamic.
Exactly. So hopefully we achieved that to some extent.
Not much.
Did not cost much. It cost about $200 total out of our pocket.
Yeah.
About 60% of that was feeding people pizza.
Pizzas, yeah.
Yeah, more or less. We had it was a skeleton crew. We had just a DP. And a few technical people helping out, and then Hayden and I, Robert and my father, and Brian Walsh, who provided the camera. So the film was done very cheaply, but it was done so cheaply not because we cut corners necessarily, but because we had so many favours from people offering their assistance, and that was all the way through from Robert, who we'll talk about in a moment, through to the camera being lent to us, to our old school, which is actually where we shot the film, which is on the old school stage. So it was favours all the way, right up until the post-production where we had Paul McCosh.
Professional sound.
We made it the old school stage because we were presented with 2 options. When we first come up with the idea, we wanted a very white, depthless, shadowless space in which this film would be created to create a real atmosphere from that sort of, devoid of anything purgatory, which is what we wanted it to look like.
Yeah.
We had no idea how we were going to do this, of course. So the school basically said to us, we've got 2 things you can use. You can use a basement room, which is a white room, looks very sort of dingy and dark and that sort of stuff, but it was very real as well. The bricks could be seen and things like that. So that was one way to do it. And the other way, I said, we'd prefer to do it in this sort of endless space look. And the person, Les Dickinson from the school, said, well, how about you try this? You can put a white cyclical sheet around the school stage, and we can act on the stage, shoot it on only one side, and that will give us that white look. Unfortunately, it didn't at first. So what happened was we had not a white sheet. You can see from the photographs, it's actually beige.
there was massive creases, massive shadows.
Yes.
And where the sheet hit the ground, there was obviously a big crease that you
behind.
could see.
Yep. So I mean, it made it pretty much impossible. We thought, okay, how can we add to this? We used 17 stage lights, very bright ones. It was hot to act in there, in fact. And you can actually see the stadium look of the lighting in some of the shots there, like when the hand comes down. That was because of just enormous numbers of stage lights on it to try and lift it out. And then we opened the lens aperture to try and flood it even more. The result there in the raw footage, as you can see, is just still not that look that we wanted. So the white effect was actually achieved on a home PC using Adobe After Effects. Very basic sort of effect. It was basically just to lift the brightness, and this created a flooded out look. And then with a bit of tweaking and stuff, that basically became what it was. We lifted the contrast to match it, which is why the film has a sort of grainy look, which we sort of were happy with afterwards.
We like how the characters like Mr. Roberts sort of blend into the background
with his white shirt and things. So it's all more or less accidental. We didn't think that would happen, but it did. And I guess that's kind of one of the good things about it now.
That's right.
And then some of the wide shots were easily the hardest. We couldn't flood them with the brightening effect. So basically what we had to do with those, I had to frame by frame paint over the shadows and the divide in the floor. And that's why the wide shots are few and far between. But that's how we got that look. And I think they're probably the biggest indicator of the spaceless look of the film. So
they were necessary, but hard to
painstaking. So it took a total of about 6 months to get through that process and edit 2.5 hours of footage into the first 11-minute cut, and then down into the 7-minute one, which you've probably seen on YouTube. The blood effect was another one of the things that we got Faber helped us out with. We had Courtney Matheson, who was a family friend's friend, and she's a makeup artist. She provided us with $40 worth of blood, which is a part of where the $200 went.
That's right.
And she just gave us a few little industry techniques to get the blood look. We only had 2 in the script, 2 moments of bleeding that were really integral. The first was to show Hayden's initial bleeding, which was through a drip it's fed through in a plastic tube.
It was stuck into my hair.
Yep. And when we actually shot that, if you can sort of see it in the original footage, the blood just sort of creeps out very slowly. That's actually me pumping furiously and trying to direct the scene at the same time, so it was pretty chaotic. But I think that looked pretty good. And then the next one was, of course, the open stomach wound.
Me holding my guts in.
Yeah, and that one was just pretty much done with me behind Hayden squirting blood in with a horse syringe and getting him to manipulate it around a bit. And so that's how we did that.
Paul McCosh, who is a professional sound engineer, who has worked with my father before on other projects, and he basically we asked him if he could do it, and he was very enthusiastic about it and just helped us out.
And so he did all the sound engineering, the post production. About a third of Hayden's dialogue is actually post-synced, re-recorded in the studio. So
because I pretty much mushed my dialogue.
If you've heard one word Hayden has said in this interview thus far, you're doing better than most people.
That's right.
So we had to redub some of Hayden's stuff with more enunciation, and that probably helped the film a lot. We even now can sort of not tell which parts were actually dubbed and which weren't.
Yeah, they're very good. I challenge you to find the dubbed.
The soundtrack, originally we had a temp soundtrack done using the soundtrack of Ravenous, a film that we both like and really fitted the style of the film. But we obviously couldn't use that for copyright reasons. So we had to get a friend to compose the music, and we had a friend from school called Ed Paxton, who's very musically talented. And we asked him if he'd want to do it. He said he'd love to, and he composed the entire thing on his home musical keyboard,
home PC
and a keyboard, and just did it himself. And I think it's an excellent soundtrack. So he did an amazing job with that.